Hi, Jegyasa. Morning, and thank you for joining in. And first, congrats on your ASA and Oxford admits.
Thank you, Arvind. Thank you so much for having me. And it's good to see you.
Same here. So, the purpose or agenda of this session, Jegyasa, is to hear your experience through the process, through um, sort of the applications for EC and Oxford, and particularly on the interview, right? Because we work mostly on we work in three sessions. So the first was a brainstorming session to sort of understand your motivations, etc., to look at broadly sort of prioritized programs, and then we did mock interviews for particularly for these two programs.
Right.
So, why don't we start? If you just give us a background, your experience, and why
Right.
you sort of plan to do an MBA.
Right. So I actually have a bachelor's in commerce from Delhi University, and I have been working for about 5 years at this point. I During the course of my undergrad, I did do two internships at McKinsey and at Deloitte, and post that I actually I went into the entire process slightly undecided, so I tried to figure out what was it that I liked, and I actually even went on to work with NatWest Group. I worked with NatWest Group in the capacity of a risk associate for about 3 years, I want to say. I used to work with NatWest, and I used to, outside of the BAU activities, which had to do with MIS and risk reporting, I used to drive a lot of initiatives internally for process optimization and creating efficiency within the organization. And that's when I realized that that was something that I was actually quite good at, so it made a lot of sense to actually from go back where I came from. Uh, my my fondness for consulting, so that's where I went. I've actually switched to consulting, and I have been working as a management consultant for the last 2 years at this point. And I work at Grant Thornton. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it about my background. Outside of all of these things, I think I have done a few courses, a few long term courses. So I did one course with Singapore Management University right out of my undergrad. I did a course on Asia Pacific business expansion, which I think was a really interesting opportunity to get a sense of what is happening within the Asian region. And the other was a course that I actually just, got done with. It was a course with INSEAD, which was a course on strategic management and business essentials. So I think that's what I have been doing professionally and academically for the last 5, 6 years. And yeah, pretty much. That's about my
Okay,
background.
good. Okay, good. And so, what motivated you to pursue an MBA at this point?
Right. There were a few reasons actually. I think I had been working at like I've been working at my current organization for almost 2 years now, and I think I had hit some sort of a plateau in terms of what kind of work I was getting and what sort of responsibilities I was being given, and I think I wanted a little more than that. Um, but the solution was not very apparent. I had a lot of conversations with not just my managers, but with other hiring managers as well, to get a sense of what is it that I needed to do to sort of step up from where I am. And that's when I realized that, one, I think MBA is a very important it's a very important piece within the jigsaw. That's very, like, I think a lot of employers see that as a very important piece for you to have. And the other, of course, which was slightly more important than the first one, was that because I had worked in the financial services industry, I have been working in the financial services industry for the last 5 years. I have been able to get a sense that, um, because I have a very one sided a very myopic view of what I know. So I needed to go back to school to get a understanding of other disciplines. You have operations, you have technology, you have you have marketing. And when I talk about this, like, understanding of different disciplines, I think this became even more apparent when I actually moved to Grant Thornton, because I work as a client facing management consultant, and usually the problems that come to me are not um they're not very very like, they're not airtight in the sense that you would get the
Yeah,
same kind of problem. So it's very important that you have like a very holistic view of the business, and that was definitely something that I did not have. uh, a part of it had to do with what I had studied. A part of it had to do with who and where I was employed over the last 5 years. So yeah, and uh, that's why that's why I think MBA is the next important step. And I mean, I think the other reason that I think is very very essential for me personally is because I have been working as uh, um, within operational consulting for so long now, for the last 2 years. I also want to get a taste of what strategy consulting looks like, and for me to sort of move from that one domain to the other, I also have to level up in terms of the firms that I've been working with. So that's where the MBA sort of comes in. For you to level up to something like that, I think MBA becomes an important part of the entire process. And I think MBA is also where you acquire the kind of knowledge that you would need to drive strategy consulting projects. So yeah.
sure. And there's also the geography angle, right? Because you're looking at um, pockets outside of India to work in consulting.
So um going into the process, I thought I was agnostic, but I don't think I am. I have a great fondness for the European territory for two reasons. One, I think the markets there are developed, um, and I think they have what I want to do. I have always talked about working at the intersection of finance and technology, and the markets in Europe are quite developed that way, and they have the opportunities that I want to tap into. So if I was to talk about specific geography, I would say Western Europe is where I'm looking at. So markets in London, Amsterdam, Germany, or even the Scandinavian countries initially. That's
Yeah.
where I'm looking at this point in time.
Okay. Yeah. Great. So, just wanted to shift the topic to choosing or prioritizing the right school, right? So, could you tell us about what criteria or factors you considered when you're looking at schools?
Right. So to be really frank, I don't think I had a really long list. I only had two very, very important criterias. One was how well was it that the school that I chose was doing in consulting, because that's where I want to go. And second was just how well knit and cohesive the community is. Because I've had, I think at this point, I've had at least 100 plus conversations with alumni, with admission committee members, with basically everyone under the sun. And everyone that I've spoken to has emphasized just how important your network is. And I think you can only have a very good network when the school community is very close and very, they're very centered and uh, they're very centered in what they think about the school and what they think about themselves. So when I was researching the programs, there were programs that that were great, but I did not think they were a good fit for me, mostly because I did not feel very greatly about the school communities. So I mean, for me, the like, how talking to a lot of people from the same school made me feel was very important. And how they felt about the school also was another very important factor, because I think that is something that we don't get a very good view of initially, at least when you are at the applicant side of the table. How people speak about this school is very important, and everyone that I spoke with, I think, had glorious things to sort of say about ESA. So ESA was definitely on, on the top of my list when I was looking at different B schools.
Okay. Yeah. Good. So any in terms of ESC specifically, based on your conversations with alumni or on your research, what were anything specific that stood out in terms of curriculum, faculty, or any other aspect? Right?
Right. I think I'd love to take you back to the initial application process when I started writing my application for ESA. I think 4 days before my application submission, I actually happened to speak to one of the alumni, one of the alums at the school, and I requested her that could you please have a look at my essays. And that's exactly what she did. She took the time, she took the pain to review my essays, and she gave me fabulous insights into what was it that I could do with my essay. So from that point on, not only was her advice very transformational in terms of making an impact on my application, but that also left a really deep impact on what I thought about the school. I think going back to what I had just said, um like the fact that everyone is just so willing to help each other, and that was an experience that I had with practically every single alumni with ESA. I think I've spoken to 20 plus alums at this point at ESA, and I've only received warm and very very strong yes, we want to help you, yes, how can we do it together, yes, what is it that you need to do, from everyone that I've spoken to. So I think that was definitely one very big reason why I was influenced, towards the essay. But the other more practical aspect of why I want to go to ESA has to do with the fact that they do they do a really good job, teaching the ethics and the responsibility and sustainability portion of their curriculum. And as someone who is very keen to pivot in into that area in some capacity, I think how well a curriculum does in teaching that specific discipline was also very important. And everyone that I spoke with who had taken these classes, I think I spoke to about 3 or 4 different alums. They again had really good things to say about those specific courses, and uh, and just how well the learnings from those specific courses have become a part of their professional life now. So that definitely was something that I wanted for myself. So yeah.
Okay, great. That's good to know. So, let's jump to uh, the interview experience, right? So with IESE in Oxford, so we'll first talk about IESE first. Could you share about so they have an interview process which includes an assessment day and then an alumni interview. Yes, could you tell us about your assessment day, how it was, what the process was about, and your experience, basically?
Right. So the process, like you rightly pointed out, it's divided into two parts. My assessment day, we were given a case study to discuss about, a, like it was a business expansion problem that we were not business expansion, sorry, market assessment problem that we were
Yeah.
asked to assess. And we were expected to have a discussion. So essentially how this works is that all the people who get an invite are then later divided into groups of 8 to 10 people, who then who then go on to become a team, and where they have like discussions within the group. So I think my experience at assessment day was rather average, if I may say so. I did get opportunities to speak, but I wouldn't say I got too many opportunities to speak. Although at that point in time, I thought that was a make or break within the process. Now that I think about it, I think every time that I did get an opportunity to speak, the choice, like making a choice to say something very, very impactful, something that's
Yeah,
very, very relevant to the problem, and something that could, be a potential key driver of the discussion, is what I think worked in my favor. I think the other really important thing I should point out, for me, being able to create an impression that I was someone who was well spoken, could be a good team player, and could be a good team leader as well, in that moment was very important, because the person who was the moderator of my team at assessment day also happened to be my interviewer. So it was just so, it had become, twice as important for me to
yeah,
come across a certain way, because I knew what impression this person carried of me from assessment day would continue to sort of reflect on me even during my interview. And I think assessment day otherwise went on very, it it went on quite smoothly without any issues as such. And yeah, I mean, I think assessment day was good, and my interview, although it got slightly delayed, I think my interview was extremely conversational. My interview was actually, it was conducted by an alum of the school, uh, of 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 Indian nationality. So I think he had a great sense of of what and how the careers look like in India. um my my interview, outside of being very, very conversational, I think um it was it was also a part, of the process, where I think the school was trying to understand where and how does the school fit into realizing the goals. And that's what, I mean, that's essentially what my interviewer was also trying to get a sense of. And I think we spent about good 20 to 25 minutes having a conversation uh, about my goals, about the school's fitment, and about about just how important an MBA becomes within that process. So I think knowing my reasons really well and knowing my application and my CV really well was a very, very important part of the interview uh, at ESA.
yeah. Great. So I think I want to maybe touch on one point there is, you mentioned during the assessment day, you didn't actually feel like, it went so great. And that's something that I've noticed with candidates both. So generally during interviews is sometimes you might feel, you could have done much better, or the interview is sort of grilling down, or sort of, it's being very tough. But actually, in some cases, that's a good sign, because they want to know more, and then you sort of actually strike a conversation and a connection. That's why the conversation extends and it goes deeper.
Right,
And yeah, I have most of those cases I've seen positive results, right, than negative results. Okay,
right.
that's good. So, could you also tell us about your Oxford MBA interview experience? So, what was the process? Who was the interviewer? How did it go, etc.?
Right. So with Oxford, I think my interview again was very smooth. But I will point out, going into the Oxford interview, I was far more nervous than I was about going into the ESA interview, tip, for specifically one reason, because Oxford interviews are usually with AdCom, or from some, it's with someone within the admissions team. So it's sometimes that much harder to to get a sense of what is it that they're expecting from you. uh Having said that, I think my interview was again very, very conversational. It was a great interview. My interview was actually with a person named Grant Nixon. No, not Grant. Someone named Grant. I think his name was Grant, and he was a part of the admissions committee. And he has, I think, he had been an advisor to the school for the last 20 years. He's an industry expert, and that's why, again, like, knowing your story, knowing your reasons, for me at that point again was very, very essential, because I don't think you can you can really beat around the bush in front of an industry expert. And I think that interview went slightly better than how my ESA interview actually went, I would say. um, I had actually spoken about one really interesting project within my application, and he was very, very keen to know about that one specific project. So a big chunk of our entire conversation ended up talking, we ended up talking about that specific project. So yeah, like I said, I think that specific scenario sort of illustrates to me just how important it is for everyone, who is a part of this process, to know what is it that they're wanting to deliver with that specific piece of information that they're mentioning on that application, and using that piece of information to their advantage should that come up in the interview. So yeah.
Okay, great. Any sort of unexpected insights or questions that you faced during the interview, and in hindsight, when you think about it?
I think I wouldn't call it really unexpected. I would just say that I think you don't believe it until you go through it yourself. Sort of an insight, really. I had heard from a lot of people, including you, Arvind, that schools are not looking for reasons to eliminate you from the process. They're looking for reasons to actually admit you. And both my interviews, both at Oxford and at ESA, I think were a testimony of that fact. Both the interviews sort of, they made me realize that the schools wanted to give me an opportunity to talk a little bit more about what is it that I wanted to do with an MBA program, and what was it that the school could do for me, and the school wanted me to give them reasons why should they take me in, not so much
Yeah,
why they should not take me in. So yeah, and I think that can only happen if you talk more and more to people, because that is only when you can answer these questions convincingly. So yeah, I mean, I think it really helps to not just get a sense of the school, but also talk about your reasons of getting an MBA, not just with say your friends, peers, the person you're working with, for your application, but also with the alumni, and alumni, current students, and the adcom at school. I think these three people, although like people they take a lot of time to write their applications, I think people don't spend as much time talking to other people, discussing these intricacies of their application. And if they did do that, I think their process and this process and the outcome of it would become that much better and easier for them.
yeah, absolutely, I agree. Could you tell us about, you guess, about how you prepared for the interviews, and what advice would you have for future applicants that not attend interviews at these schools?
Right. So my interview prep, I think, was largely driven by three resources. One would be the first resource, I think, would be like my own application, my essays, and my reasons. Knowing these three things really well is very important. And I think I spend a long time trying to, like, reinstate the reasons and my story to myself when I was preparing for these interviews. The second resource that I used was actually the interview debriefs that you find online for various schools. I think they really give you a really good insight into how and what the school is, how the school functions, and what is it that they're looking for. And I think that is one resource that everyone should really use. And the third and the most important resource, I think, was the time that I spent with you, Arvind, the interview prep that I did with you. I think that was a game changer. I will point out that I have been, a very confident conversationalist and an orator for a really long time now. So that was not something that I was particularly nervous about. I think I needed like some amount of method on how to structure my answers, and that's where, that's where you were god sent. You helped me structure these answers really well. You sort of prompted me in ways, you prompted me to refine my story, refine my outlook, and sort of deliver the same story but in a far more impactful manner. So I think these three resources were the key in my preparation. And I think probably the fourth thing that I could think of right now was having uh, having a buffer set of different stories that, that I'd spent a really long time sort of creating. I think that was another resource that came in really handy in instances where the adcom or the alumni wanted to talk about something very different or something out of the out of the ordinary. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, that's good to know. Thank you. So, just want to discuss a bit on our, if you could share about our working experience, right? So, the process we went through, sort of, you touched upon it a bit, but if you could just sort of talk about it a bit more in terms of the key sort of sessions we had and how it helped you.
Right. So like you had mentioned, we had about four sessions, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah.
One was about one where we went on prioritizing what programs was it that I should apply to, and the other three were largely for my interviews. I think I'll talk a little bit more about the interview portion first, because I think that's where it was an absolute game changer for me personally. um I think you were I couldn't have met a better mentor or a friend to guide me through that process. uh and I don't think I've said this enough to you. You were super duper accommodating with my very very erratic schedule, and you dealt with me really really patiently. And the kind of insight, like I mentioned, the kind of insight that you gave me about how to structure my answers and deliver them in a more impactful manner was something that I think was my biggest takeaway from my work with like our work and our collaboration. And I think the other thing that I really understood after talking to you was just how essential it is to sort of focus on very key things that we want to deliver instead of talking about multiple things which might not be as impactful. And that's what I think I was initially doing when we first started talking. So yeah, absolutely, I think that was of great help for me personally.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's very good to hear. And could you also talk a bit about the school prioritization process? Right? So we had a discussion. I think it was also sort of there were discussions ongoing through the interviews, etc. In terms of how to approach, because most candidates they look at even European schools or US schools or a bunch of programs, and it becomes important to know, as you pointed out a bit before, to know exactly what you want and then prioritize those based on your specific criteria, right? Because there's no right or wrong answers per se. What might work for one person might not, and vice versa.
Right. I think one thing that you said to me has stuck with me. Like it stuck with me. That's like you said, just how important it is to get a to have like a really clear sense of what is it that you're seeking from your MBA program, and using that as an anchor to sort of to make that decision. And I think I I initially had voiced to you just how important it was for me to go to a school that does well in consulting. So you sort of made me think deeply about the programs that I might not have thought about very deeply. I'll be really honest. I think going into the process, ESA was that school initially for me, because it was in Spain. I did not know too much about it, at least initially. But after talking with you, I realized what great resources ESA had for what was it that I wanted to do. And I think I think that, and you made me also see, instead of fixating on instead of fixating on the other things that might not be as important. Like I think I remember talking about uh, like the outcomes, the professional outcomes, although it's a very important part of your MBA. I
Yeah.
think that is one thing that we tend to hyper focus on. And after speaking with you, I think I realized one thing, that if I'm only going to use that one reason to sort of base my decision, then I think I might not be able to sort of make a very, very holistic decision for myself. So
Yeah.
I think that's where everything that you and I spoke about came in. So yeah.
Okay, good. So we'll wrap it up, Jegyasa. So any advice that you have for future candidates, you know, with the process and from what you've experienced?
I think I have two advices. One would be, I think everyone spends a really long time, and I think I'm also really guilty of that, with their standardized tests. I understand that they are a very important part of the process, but I think an even more important part, maybe not if an even more, but I think an equally important part of the process is is thinking, ruminating, and understanding everything that you've done so far in your life, and what specific incidents can you actually pick up from your experiences so far to talk about what is it that the schools want you to talk about. Because usually what happens, because we spend just so much time preparing for these standardized tests, like prepping for these essays sort of take a back seat. And I think that was one thing that, although I started doing that about 6 months before the application process started. So I think I was fairly better prepared than a lot of other people would be. But I think if people have the luxury of time, or if people have the luxury of, not the luxury, but I think if they're willing to make that sort of an effort, I think people should really spend a very good, hefty amount of time trying to understand themselves and ruminating those specific stories that they want to bring out. Because we, t- because the kind of stories that a lot of people sort of talk about, I have read, a lot of my own essays, and I've also read a lot of different essays that my friends have written. And I think you can really tell the difference when someone has spent that time,
Yeah.
um, to talk about things that are important. So I think my first advice would be to spend as much time as you can to sort of fine tuning those really important stories and finding those right stories. One would be that. And I think my second advice would be, uh, and as cliches as it is going to sound, I think there's a lot of worth in being absolutely authentic, being absolutely super true to yourself when you're making these applications. Because if you're trying to sell something to the schools that is not authentic, I think schools can sort of see that from a mile. They've been doing these things for a really long time now, and they can they can cut through all the BS that usually becomes a part of, of
Yeah.
this process. So I think having the courage to, be really honest in your applications is another very important thing that I think people should do. I think personally for me, that was one of the big game changers in my ESA application. I had the things uh, courage to talk about things and take risk. So you like I think I'll talk a little bit about this. So there's an essay within the ESA application where they talk about, it's an optional essay, and the
Yeah.
prompt reads something to the effect of what is it in the application that you've not covered and you want to talk about. And instead of going the usual route of talking about weaknesses in my application, or some something really different, I actually utilized that essay to talk about how passionate I am about some specific causes. And like the specific cause here being the cause of women empowerment. I use that essay to
Yep.
talk about my experiences within that space. And I personally think that essay was the reason why I eventually got the fourth scholarship uh, at ESA. So I think having the courage to do that and being absolutely true to yourself is where I think people should make an extra effort. And they shouldn't be really like, I don't think anyone should be really worried about what do you call uh, to not like everyone, no one should be forced to follow a specific norm. I think this is also visible in how I personally approach my applications. Usually that essay is not used to talk about things like these. I use that essay to talk about that. The other thing out of the ordinary that I did was I actually did not utilize the Oxford's CV format to make that CV, because I did not think that worked for me. I didn't think that I would have been able to deliver uh, my best possible CV had I used their had I used their format. So I think like no one should be worried too much about all of these very 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 bureaucratic things. If you're authentic, it'll come out, and I think you'll be successful in the process.
Yeah. So basically, follow the game unless you have a better option, right, or a better way to do it. Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Jegyasa, and it was great hearing your insights. I'm sure it'll help future applicants. And all the best to you.
Thank you, Arvind. Thank you so much, and have a good day.
You too. Bye.
Bye bye.